about some hooks related details, like we discussed what is a context and how do we use the context. So in React hooks, so the context hook and the reducer hook. So reducer is nothing but it is used to maintain a predictable state. All these are related to managing memory. Use state will manage memory. Context will manage memory. And reducer also manages memory. So, but what is the difference between them? State manages the memory for a component which can be accessible across multiple requests in a component. But that memory cannot be shared to the other components that run within the context. For that, we need a context memory. If the context memory problem is if a component running outside the component cannot use it, a component which is within the context. We have a context scope. What is that context scope and who manages the context scope? That is managed by providers. So within the scope, if a component is running, it is accessible. What is the intention of reducer? Is maintain a central store so that you can keep the data, update the data, and access across any component. At a higher level, if you want to use, you have a separate library called Redux. So how this reducer works, what is the concept? Let's see. Few points already I told you yesterday. It is used for maintaining a predictable state. Predictable, maintainable, easily debuggable state. Developer needs to know exactly where, when, what value is going to change. That is the main aim. Otherwise, we have a lot of other techniques. We can use session storages, local storages, cookie storages for managing the data. So, as I already given few points, some more points actually. So, reducer, use reducer. Manages operations using following components. What are the components for a reducer? We have a store, we have a state, we have reducer, and we have actions. These are the main components of a reducer. So the operations and how they work. So a reducer is going to handle these components. Yesterday I explained a flow about this. So what is store? Is the location where the centralized data is kept. That means store is the location where centralized data is kept. Store is the location where the centralized data is kept. So centralized data is kept in a store. And state is used by component to access the data in store, to access the data from store and render in UI. So accessing data from store and rendering in UI is managed by state. State is going to do that. It is going to manage that. Now, what is the job of reducer? Reducer identifies the action and updates the data into the store. So that means when data is updated, what data is updated, it is monitored by reducer. So reducer defines the actions and state, defines the actions and state. So actions specify when the store need to update. Actions specify when the store need to update. So action specifies when the store need to update. So reducer is responsible for defining the state and actions. We will see Redux also, how it works, but that we will see in an example separately. How do we manage? We have to set up project for Redux, separate Redux. We need to install, configure, and all. We will do that in our application. We will do. So we will learn how to build one application now. So in that we can implement these at small and higher scale, how to use them. So store state, reducer, and actions. A cycle I explained actually. Usually, yesterday I showed you. In Redux, more detail you will understand. Actually, this is the basic cycle, how it works. I showed you yesterday. That's the basic cycle. The state. Yesterday I showed you this. State, store contains the data. State will update that into UI, and actions are identified in UI, sent to the reducer. Reducer will update into the store. This cycle continues. Actually, what is advantage of this store is this can be accessed by any component. Not only the component which is running inside the another component context. What is difference between context and reducer? Context allow the data to be shared only to the component which run in the context. But the store allows the data to be accessed from any component. Any component can access the store and use the store. So centralized we are maintaining. We will put in an example. We will see how it is done in a larger scale. We are going to build one app. In that we will put that. Let's first basically see how it is written, how it is configured. Actually, configuring have several phases. First, you have to configure a store. Configure a store globally with the initial state. With initial state, you have to configure the store globally because all components should use. You have to configure it globally. So we have to configure the store globally with initial state. Initial state means when application starts, what should be the value? I told you we use this for maintaining an application memory. The duration of application memory is from application start to application end. Generally, context is used for a session component. State is also used for a session, that is only for a component. But this is used globally, that is application state. I told you that, for example, so you are some watching YouTube live something. Actually, you have to start live. You need to start the live. That means now application starts a memory. In that memory, how many users are currently watching? Initial state will be 0. Now what happens is from a different session, people join into it. From a different session, people join into it. So actually, what happens is one object is created, and this object is used for the first request, and that object is applied here. Object is created for first request and this will continue for others. It will continue for others. You see on Facebook or YouTube, when somebody posted something, it will show be first to like. That means you are the first person to like. Once you like, now the likes counter starts. Until that likes counter will not start. And that likes counter will update externally from another state. Somebody other person likes, it will update. If a counter is being updated from different sessions, that means all are using same object. If all are not using the same object, how it knows what previous have done? That this mechanism is called singleton. It is called singleton mechanism. Singleton means actually application state, session states. In general, web development, for every session, a session state will be maintained. That is called single call at high level. Single call is a mechanism where an object is created for every client and it is individual for that client. Once the client finishes, that object is destroyed. And the object of that client is not accessible to other. Every client is individual. This mechanism is single call. We technically in web development call this type of state as session state. And this is application state. This is application state. An object is created for first request and the same object will continue for others. What is the point here is this update users live count will continue from the previous people. And when it stops, when the application stops, is it possible that an application can stop? Of course, it is possible that the application can stop. Suppose you are giving some, writing some online exam. They give a URL, and that URL will be available only during that particular scheduled time. After that, you try to access, it is not available. That is done regularly. It's not a new thing. That means we start the application, and during that, how many people are writing the exam? That information count is updated. You will get at the bottom some websites. You are user number 10, you are user number 15. They show that when they have the live count, and that is not continuing forever. One application starts, next day the count continues. The count will reset. That is what application state is. From application start to application end. Session state is some session start to session end. So what is the concept of the reducer? To maintain a global state and start with some initial value. So how we configure? We will create initial state. In initial state, so we will put here some object like users count. So is some 0. How many users are currently watching your live broadcast? So that is set to 0. That means this is a store. This is the store. So in the store, what is the data you are storing? We are storing an object. You can store anything. It can be a simple number. It can be array. It can be array of objects. Anything you can store. We are creating an object. We are storing an object that contains users count. That comprises of users count. So first you have to manage a global store. So I think I showed you this. Yeah. It will manage the global store. So this is the first thing. We are managing the store with the initial state. Now this store is updated by whom? This store is updated by whom? This store is updated by reducer. We need a reducer. Reducer is going to update the store. When it will update the store? On particular action. That means now the reducer contains two things. One, the data to update, that is state. Another, action to perform. That means on which action, what data, where it should be updated. It is all decided by what? Reducer. Why it is predictable to developer? Because developer can track the reducer. Developer can track the action, developer can track the value, and he can see what is performed. That means it is going to identify this. Reducer is going to identify the action. That is why we call this predictable, because developers have a complete clarity where the data is stored, what data is stored, when it is updated. We can debug it. We'll see in the Redux. I will show you. We will install some extra tools. By using those tools, we can see how to debug. Means how to track. We will see the complete tracking diff mechanism. Means what is previous value, what is current value, what it updated, when it updated, all that information. It shows even in a graphic form. You have separate extensions for that actually. Here we have that extension. I will use this one. So we have several extensions for that. We can try those extensions and install them, and we can monitor them. So we have some extensions. So by using that extension, we can handle it. We have an extension that is web store. Yeah, we can here install. So we have Redux Dev Tools. These are Redux Dev Tools. You can install this extension in your browser. If you can install this extension in browser, you can track the complete activities. You can debug the values. Other values you cannot monitor. What is happening, we cannot do. But you can clearly track this. When we are dealing with a higher level Redux, I will show you. We can set up that and use it. So now first is already the store is configured. Now second step is we have to configure a reducer, which is a function that comprises of state and actions. That comprises of state and actions. So you have to configure a reducer. Usually reducer is a function that comprises of state and actions. So we configure a function called reducer. This reducer function will have a state and we have action. On which action, what it should perform, that is decided here. That means this, suppose we write a switch, because there can be many actions, then we pass an action type. That means suppose somebody is watching a live video. If somebody is watching live, have to watch a live video. So what are the options given to him? Join conference and exit conference. Suppose you are joining Zoom, join class and leave class. That means the actions perform. What are the actions given to the user? When it should update? When user joins, count will increase. When user exits, the count will decrease. That means now what happens here? The action to perform, action type. The case is if the action type is join, some name you can give. Then what it should happen? So it should return. That means it should return an object where we have users count. Users count will be state plus 1. That means it will increment by 1. And if it is case exit, so if it is case exit, then it will return an object where users count will be state minus 1. Now this state is actually used by the local components. So what happens now? The state value will be increased by 1. It will be increased by 1 and it will store in this user count. And who is this state? State is responsible for accessing the data from store. State is responsible for accessing the data from store. It is going to access the data from store. It shows the data. And this data is going to be updated also. That means who updates the state again? Reducer will take this state. It will update. Reducer will take the state. It will identify what changes happened according to action. And it will update that state into the store. So if anybody joins our conference, then we will say that user count state will increment by 1 and it will use. State is using store and store is having initial state. Initial state is nothing but user count. User count is how much? 0. That means actually state is 0. 0 plus 1 increments. That means on which action what data need to be updated into the store. This is the store. On which action what data is updated, that is decided by reducer. Reducer defines the action and reducer contains the state. So we configure a global state and we configure a reducer. Now how every component can use it? That means the configuration is done. That means you decided what to store and you decided when to update. What to store? User count. When to update? When user join, when user exit. What to update? The state, how many users are watching. We need to update. So what here we can do is, next step, how any component can use this store. That means a component can access the store and use the actions from a reducer. A component can access the store and use the actions from reducer by using a hook, and that hook is use reducer. What is this use reducer hook? Already some reducer is present. Your component is using that reducer. And what reducer contains? Reducer contains the data stored and the actions to be performed. Reducer comprises of the action store. Now how this works? So we need to configure like this. We need to create. Remember now this use reducer have an option. We declare a state and we use a dispatch. What is this dispatch? Here it can be any term. Dispatch is nothing but we use this word to indicate that we are sending some action, dispatching some action, dispatching some event. Because what reducer is having? Reducer is having action and reducer is having state. So when that state is updated, when an action is performed, from where that action is performed? From your component. From your component, some join action is performed. That means you have to dispatch this action to reducer. If you dispatch the action to reducer, reducer will catch the action and it will update the store. Reducer is present somewhere. Into that reducer, we need to send an action. Who sends the action? A dispatcher will do. A dispatcher will send the action. And actually, it's a general thing. You already learnt events. What is the definition I given for event? Event is a message sent by sender to its subscriber to notify the change. Sender dispatches that notification. Sender will dispatch the notification. When you click, what happens? A notification is dispatched and it indicates so that it will perform the functionality. So technically now the use reducer hook, this reducer hooks uses two things. What it will use? It is going to use the reducer. Reducer contains current state and the actions. Current state is 0 and the actions we have two. What are those? One is join, another one exit. Reducer contains two things. It contains the state and the action. So use reducer will use this action and state, and this action and state should update data into which location? This action and state should update data into the store, and that store is configured as what? Initial state. It is configured as initial state. That means what happens is, whenever any action is dispatched by using this reducer, what it will do is, it will collect the state and it will store in the initial state. It is going to update into the initial state. So use reducer requires a reducer and initial state, and reducer requires action and state. Action and state are configured inside the reducer. Now what we do is, here we have to dispatch actions on various events. Dispatch actions on various events. We have to dispatch actions on various events. That means, for example, we have a function like join click. On join click, which action should be dispatched into reducer? So reducer related actions can be accessed by using which one? Dispatch. So we have to use dispatch. We have to dispatch. What is the type? Type is what? Join. That is the object. That means this is what we need to dispatch. That means what is the type of action we are dispatching? Join. That means now into this reducer, this object is sent. What that object contains? Object contains a key called type. The key type indicates what is the action type. The action type is collected here. The action type is collected here because action is an object. Action object contains a property type which indicates is it join or is it exit. If it is join, then action type is join, then it will increment the count. It will increment the count and it will make it available to this state. That means it will update in which location? Initial state, which is accessible by whom? State. And that state will update here. That means anywhere you can update the state dot what? Users count. State usually contains users count. That is the data stored. State refers to what? Initial state. Initial state is what? Initial state is an object which contains users count. Into that users count, that will be updated. That means it is updated and it is defined. It is updated and it is defined. Similarly, we have another function. What is it? Exit click. On exit click, what happens? It will dispatch and the dispatch type will be what? Exit, and on exit it will decrement, and that state updates the user's count. It is going to update the user count. So at a smaller scale, this is enough. But when you are building a large application, we have to maintain a lot of different types of data centrally. Then better you can use the third party library, Redux stores. And it can be used everywhere. Angular uses, React uses, and various other JavaScript application uses Redux. Everywhere we can use that. We will see that. We will see in an application development how we do that. Right? Now, this is the concept of how we can configure a reducer. Let's do this and see. I will keep a component here. Let's add the reducer demo. A new file, reducer demo.jsx. As of now, we are defining at a simple component level. Later, we will put in an application level. So, because we are understanding what it is, then we can implement where to implement. So, export function reducer demo. Okay, in this, suppose we are returning a container. So container fluid. Okay, so here we will put a simple div class as card padding to margin 4 and yeah, so W50 something like this, and here we say deflex justify content center. Okay, now this card have so another div. I will just keep a class card header, and here we will just keep, so just keep a heading, some React JS live. Okay, and we will keep a div. Let's keep class card footer, card body, text center. Okay, and in this we will keep an iframe. So iframe source. Let's put some video link here. I will copy any video link. We have some video. Okay, just I will copy this video link. This is the video URL code, right? This is the video code. Let's copy the video code. Fine. https:// youtube.com/embed/the code. Okay, that's fine. So now class name, or say simply width is 100%, and we have an height, let's say 300. Okay, that is the body, and here we will keep so a simple button as join, and we have another button exit something. So card footer, so text center, and we have like class BTN and BTN, so primary and margin S2. Okay, this is class BTN and BTN danger. Okay, and we will keep this in the startup reducer demo. Okay, this is not required. So now we are having this. Yeah, this is the option we have. I think this is margin E we give. Okay. Now we need to keep the count of the people who are currently watching. So here we will put a paragraph, live users, right? That's the count we will keep. Later we will design an environment with a concept called routes, right? What will happen? Multiple users can log in. We will create cookies. We will learn how do we manage session for everyone. Then they can join. Then this count should update. So now what we will do here is we will go to create a store here. So initial state. This is an object, users count, set to how much? 0. We need to create a function. What is it? Reducer. Reducer contains two things. One is state, another one is action. And we configure a switch where we pass the action. So where we pass the action type. And this action type is join. Then we will return an object, so which contains users count, so which will be state plus 1. It should be updated. And another case, this is exit. There we will return, so users count, so state minus 1. So that's what we are configuring. Now this must be used in our store. That means here any component can use. So we have to define a constant. So we need one state, another one dispatch. And it uses an use reducer. Use reducer comprises of reducer, another one is initial state. Initial state. You need two functions. So handle join click and another function handle exit click. Exit click. On join click, what should happen? We have to dispatch an object with a type as what? Join. And here we need to dispatch. So dispatch the type as what? Exit, so that it knows what action is performed. Now these should be handled on the button click. That means we have to use on click. On click is handle join click, and here on click is handle exit click. That's the action. I'm using in this component actually. This is one user. Like that, there can be different components. Every component can use this reducer. Just like yesterday, every component can use context. Here, every component can use the reducer. So, for all of them, state is same. If you update from any place, it will update everywhere. It is going to update from every location. So usually this is not the right environment to test, because you need multiple users to test application level state. You need multiple users log in from multiple place. Then we can manage that, right? Initially, see here, suppose what we are doing, we need to display the count here. How do we get the count? Get the count state dot what users count. That state is able to access the initial state. In that initial state, we have the count. So that is how it is managing. That means now let's see here. When somebody clicks on join, that means it says, so object, what is object it is showing? It is updating, returning 1 1. Where we use it this, where is the state? Some value is not updated, just like check that. Here some count increment update is not done. So user count is a number. This is user count. It is an object. User count is a key. Some object is missing. What is missing? Initial state not. Here increment have some issue. Let's check. Actually, user count. This will be state only. What it is returning a state plus 1, state plus 1. Actually, this is returning an object. We will check that. We need to update this user account. Let me log this once here. Let's check here. Acha, user account. The log we will create here. Some third party is something is blocked here. That is actually users count. Users count. What's the problem in this user count? Actually, we will put one thing, state dot user count plus 1 and state dot user count plus 1. So initially 0, it will be fine. Because actually here what is happening is this user count is the value you need to update. So state is sending an object. Actually state is coming with an object. This state is an object. This state is an object. In that we have what? Users count. Users count. Now what we are doing is directly we are using state plus 1. That means it's an object plus 1. But in that there is a property called users count. Because state is going to access this object. In this object there is a property called users count. So state dot users count plus 1. That's how we need to access, because state is not directly this value. State contains this entire object as value, and that object have a property called users count. We need to update. Okay, now let's see here. When you are refreshing this, I click on join, then it will live users 1. I say click again, I join, it is 2. But we don't actually do only from this. Another client will join from another browser, from another location. But for that, we need to implement the application environment. This is just at one place we are watching. This is exit. That means it says live users. From different environments, people log in, but count will be same for everybody. That is why count is same for everybody, because it is updated everywhere. But here you cannot try that. That environment is not great. For example, see here. I will copy this. I will put in a separate tab. I will put in another tab. I'm accessing this in another tab. That means here we have, so user 1, live users are 0. What we need to do, I click on join, one user join. And here one user updated. It is updated. I'm joining here. So that means some another window, another person will join. That means what will happen to users, it have to update. That is not an environment we created. It will update automatically. It will perform that. That means when user clicks here, that means it has to update. Currently, both are not same sessions, different. Currently, you open in a separate tab, you know that a separate session is maintained in every tab. So usually this can happen when user say exit, one user exits, then automatically it will update everywhere. It is going to update. As of now, it will not work. Why? Because we haven't have any configuration for that. But this is the intention of creating a centralized store. That means different users will log in from different places. For all of them, count will be same. Will be same. How you manage that? That is by using this approach. Right. So this is an example. I think here we need to have a change. This state have what? Users count plus one, huh? Right. Have users count plus one. That will be that. This is how we manage the state and configure the state. And for that we use an use reducer. So this is example for that. Let me copy this example. Copy this example. And technically speaking, what happens is different users from different places log in and the count will be same. That's how central state will work. So you will see this with one separate example like Redux. We'll create one app. In that we will put this Redux store and we can manage that. Next important, after understanding the reducer, we have other important hooks. Some more hooks are there. We have like use memo, use callback like options. But these we can try with some data in the background because they are used for saving round trips. What is a round trip? What is round trip? In web development, in every web applications, you have to handle round trips. What is round trip and how you will prevent round trips? Round trip is nothing but it is the mechanism of accessing the data every time from the server. How you save the round trips? You can cache the frequently requested data and keep it in the memory. If you can cache and keep the data in the memory within a fraction of time, if the same data is requested again, it will not go to server. It will get from the cache. This mechanism is called as what? Round trips. And use memo is used for managing the round trips. So callbacks, memos, these are used for handling round trips. Not only round trips, if server communication is happening, then they will save the time, which we will see with server. Because for that we need data from database coming to API, from API coming to our app, then we can see how it is cached, how it saves the time. For that we need to develop one app now. Once when we start designing an app, we can implement these memo and callback. Just I will give an point about them, but we will later implement them. So because for that we need a correct environment. So what is the concept of, just point I will tell, I am not giving any note, because when we work with it I will give you that. What is the concept of memo and callback is nothing but actually, so use memo is just like use effects. it is just like use effect. So it have the dependencies. What is difference between use effect and use memo? So that means use effect and use memo. What is the difference between use effect and use memo is actually use effect. Use effect is going to load your component on every change. That means it is going to load the component every time. It loads entire component every time. It loads entire component every time. In the next concepts, we are going to learn component cycle. There you will understand how the components work. Now what happens is use memo is same like this use effect, but it will update only the changes. It will not load the entire component. That means this is asynchronous. It will update only the changes. It will not load the entire component. Without loading entire component, you want to update only few. Then what you can do? We can do that by using use memo. These are later seen how we can work with them when we are bringing data and working with that. Okay. So I'm not going into this. So later we will understand. So initially these are the hooks you need to know. And gradually so many hooks you will learn with third parties now. You will see. So what is the basic point about hook? What is the purpose of hook and how we use the hooks? Hooks are used as services so that we can have predefined business logics which you can inject into a component and handle certain functionalities. We learned some built-in hooks. We learned custom hooks, how to create our own hooks. Some more hooks you are going to see in various examples, how to manage. Some hooks you have learned which are not designed by React, like use formic, use form, such hooks. So we have to use so many such hooks later also. Right? Now this is all the concept about the components related to functions. Now we are going to see how we can use React class components. We are going to understand the React class components. All these days what we have done is we designed component by using function, and components can be created through classes also. Whatever you have done with function, you can do the same with classes. But here some limitations are there, some advantages are there. In the modern React, we don't prefer these much. In the modern React, we don't use this much. Up to React 16 versions, people used to use lot of class components, and they have a reason for that. They tell you some points which are satisfying. They will complain on functions, and they say that functions don't have this, don't have that. That's the reason we are using class. But now there is no point, because functions can do everything what a class is doing. That is the reason from React 17 and higher versions onwards, officially React community recommends using of function component. We created a React template. By default, one component came. Which one? We created a React app. By default, one component came. Which one? App. What it used, a class or a function? It used a function. That means default, the React community, if you look at all their official documentations also, will be function based first. Because from 18 onwards, they give priority for that. Why we need to give that priority? So technically, in JavaScript, you already learned about classes. I am not explaining them again, right? You know all the basic of class concept. What you learned about classes, the same you have to use here. But the key point is, what is the drawback. That means class, class is a program template. Class is a program template. Technically, how you define the class? Class is a program template that provides properties, that provides sample data and logic, which you can implement and customize according to the requirements. According to the requirements. According to the user requirement. So class is a template that provides sample data and logic. Now, class is a concept of OOP, right? Class is a concept of object-oriented programming. Now tell me, what are the drawbacks of using class? What are the issues with OOP? What are the drawbacks of using OOP, object-oriented programming approach? What are the issues of OOP? So the major issues with OOP, it doesn't support low level features. So it cannot directly interact with hardware services. So it uses more memory. It is slow. These are all the issues with object-oriented approach. So object-oriented programming has a lot of issues, lot of drawbacks. It doesn't support low-level features. It cannot directly interact with hardware services. It uses more memory. It is slow. So in web applications also, when you are trying to use this OOP features, then you have lot of drawbacks, issues. Memory management, rendering slow. These are all the issues that you get with these classes. Classes requires more memory. That is the reason official React community recommends using of function components. But what is the advantage of class components? So what is good about the class components? So class components, some points I will tell you. Detailedly we will see one by one, but key points I will tell you. Class components advantage is, so they have class components, so have a built-in state. They have built-in state. That means actually the class components usually have a built-in state. Built-in state means already state is configured. So that means it doesn't require any use state. That means, so without explicit state configuration, it can manage data. That is the advantage. Actually, function component don't have that. That's the reason we have to use an use state hook. But class components have a built-in state. So usually, what is the point about and another point here is easy to extend. Easy to extend. Classes are easy to extend. So they provide a loosely coupled, loosely coupled, loosely coupled, loosely, loosely coupled and architecture. Loosely coupled architecture. They support a loosely coupled architecture. They are easy to extend. They have built-in state. People call them as stateful components. So they are very easy to extend. They support a loosely coupled architecture so that you can easily add the functionality without disturbing the existing functionality. But drawbacks is more memory, slow in rendering. These are the issues. So when some more points you will see, difference is there, lot of difference is there. That's the reason in interviews they ask, usually developers have an habit of classifying this. That means developers call them controlled components and uncontrolled components. It is not official, it is a developer's term, and it is generally used in interviews also. In every React interview, they will ask what is uncontrolled component, what is controlled component. Usually that I will explain now. Once we start learning the class, you will see. It is using built-in state. It is easy to, easy to extend. Classes provides extensibility, polymorphism, inheritance, right? But what is drawback is heavy. They are heavy on application. That's the reason. And what is the complaint? That you don't have state. They used to call functions as stateless. Even now they are stateless, but they can now use state. Earlier functions cannot use state. But now from 17 and higher versions, they introduced new hooks like use state. They can also use state. Then there is no issue at all. So that is the reason we don't use these class components much. So you see the React dev community. So React dev community, this is the React dev community. And in the React dev community, we start learning some components. That means installation, setup. Suppose we say some tutorial on something, and you see here what we are configuring and designing. Everything is a function. The official documentation with any kind of example, they all use functions. And official documentation, you can see in their official conferences, they recommend to use function components. Earlier we used to use lot of class components. Everywhere you will very rare, you will not see function classes at all in modern React. You will not see, but you have to learn about them. Why? Because your projects that you work in, companies may be still using some older versions. There you need class. And even the modern application also, sometimes some components needs regular extensions, then we better design by using class. And for that you need to have a knowledge on class. So what are the concepts you need to know about classes? In order to deal with this, you need class members. Am I right? What are class members? Class members, we have properties, we have method, we have accessor, and we have constructor. You should know about these. Already you learned these in JavaScript. For inheritance, and you have to know about polymorphism, how this works. And you need to know module system. Already we learned about functions itself. We know in functions, same thing here. These are the concepts you should be aware in JavaScript first in order to use the classes. And I hope you already know all these in JavaScript. You know the rules of inheritance in JavaScript. You know the rules of polymorphism, and you know the rules of class and class members. So property, method, accessor, constructors, you need to know all this. So once you are good in this, then you can start using classes for our React. I will give a brief overview of these concepts. If anybody don't know any certain concept about class, then they will get an idea here. Because without that, you cannot design components with the classes. You need to know how, you know the rule of inheritance in JavaScript. What is it? What is the inheritance rule in JavaScript? If you don't know, you can't create a component here. What is the inheritance rule in JavaScript for class? Inheritance rule is there now. What is it? The constructor of derived class must call the constructor of superclass. That is mandatory rule. And if you don't know such rules, you can't use classes because it have to implement that. That's the reason many people may not be aware of certain things. I will give a brief overview of these topics first. A fast brief overview of these topics I will give, then we can use them in creating components. That we'll see next session. Tomorrow we will do that, right? In tomorrow's session, I will discuss about JavaScript classes first. Then we will use these classes in our components, designing components, right? That's so that it will help you. Then we can start building one app by using these options. Remember, class components easy because already you learned everything in function. You have to just know difference. In class how we do, in function how we do. That difference we need to know. That we'll see in tomorrow's session. Okay, right?
Got it.